We have breaking news.
What?
The control room called Whoopi Goldberg. The response was a very quick no.
I can't even believe that she answered the phone.
I'm kind of shocked by that, too. Hello, Anna Navarro.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let's talk about something that happened last week on Friday night, I believe. I was getting text from you.
No, it was Thursday night.
It was Thursday night. I was getting text from you, very, very perturbed. And not for the first time. You were blaming the administration for your woes, but tell us what was happening.
I blame the administration for everything. If I gain weight, it's Donald Trump's fault. If I drink too much, it's Donald Trump's fault.
You're in touch with it, though, so that's good. Yeah.
So I'm going back home to Miami. I'm flying from New York to Miami. We are about to land. I feel that we're almost on this, descent. And all of a sudden, we go back up and we're flying around. And I'm like, okay, what is happening here? And the pilot comes on like 20 minutes into this and says, we are on a holding pattern because of space rocket debris in our airspace. The airport, Miami International Airport, has been closed. And if it's not open within the next 10 or 15 minutes, we are going to be diverted to, I think it was Orlando or God knows what. I'm like, what is happening here? And so for the second time in as many months, a SpaceX rocket that I guess is in some sort of testing phase blew up. Around Florida, the islands, and the debris field is such that they had to divert and hold all of these planes flying into Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Palm Beach, Orlando. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't know anything about space or rockets, but this is a little disturbing, the idea that with everything happening, right, all of these plane crashes, now I have to worry about a piece of falling rocket debris.
Yeah, it's
and
not
Brian,
ideal.
No. And did you read where this happened, like in January, I think, and I think it was like over the Turks and Caicos? So here's my question. Like if I'm in my backyard or if I'm walking Cha-Cha or if I'm on a boat on a cruise ship leaving Miami, can they guarantee to me that a piece of this crap isn't going to fall?
I believe
on
so.
us?
I believe it all burns up on re-entry is kind of what we're looking at for the most part. But
I'm not sure. Are you sure they haven't
No, I'm
found
not sure.
debris in Turks and Caicos?
I'm not sure. I like Turks and Caicos, though, so that's
I love
that's
Turks and Caicos.
concerning.
I ran into Sarah Haynes and her husband there one
I
time.
remember
We
that.
were both,
I remember that.
we
That was
were
the year I
both
stopped
vacation.
going. Yeah.
Oh, come on. What I don't understand is how come you go on these Caribbean vacations and you always come back as white as you left?
Actually, for me, you'll see. I'm going to go somewhere in April when we have a break. I tan. I'm Italian. I get darker, but for it's a scale. Speaking of blow-ups in Elon Musk, we talked about this reported blow-up in the Oval Office between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Elon Musk. Others were involved who supposedly. You said you saw Rubio this weekend, and you have a theory about this story. Tell me about this.
Well, I didn't speak to him about this. I
No.
saw him at the funeral of Lincoln Díaz-Balart.
Right.
The man who served in Congress representing South Florida for 18 years. Somebody I loved tremendously and admired tremendously, was very close to. So it was a very somber experience. Actually, let me talk to you a little bit about the funeral before I get into the Marco piece. It was remarkable. In fact, one of the priests said that if Lincoln is ever considered for sainthood, for beatification, the first miracle should be that he managed to get Republicans and Democrats to gather under the same roof, the same church, to pay tribute to him. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's in Congress now, was there. Kendrick Meek, who served in Congress and whose mother was a Democrat who served in Congress. The mayor of Miami-Dade, Jeb Bush, was there. Rick Scott was there. I mean, all these elected officials were there, and people from the community of all ages, all ethnicities, colors, and political variations. And frankly, it is a testament to Lincoln Díaz-Balart that 15 years after he retired from Congress, people showed up. And the reason people showed up is because Lincoln served the community and served his constituents with principle and conviction. And I was glad Marco and his wife Jeanette showed up at this funeral. Because, as I said on the show, if it wasn't for that generation of Cuban Americans, Lincoln was the second Cuban American elected to Congress. There's been many others since then. But if it wasn't for that generation, there would be no Marco Rubio. In fact, the priest talked about, when he first came, the priest is a Cuban American exile, and talked about Father Jose Luis Menendez from Corpus Christi, and talked about how when he, the priest, had first come from Cuba in 1960, he was surprised to have seen signs in Miami that read, "No blacks, no dogs, no Cubans." And I think way too many Cubans, some who are now in elected office, have forgotten that, and forgotten that they are there to represent everybody and to fight against discrimination, against racial profiling, against injustice. So now go back to Marco Rubio. So he's there. But I have a theory about this Musk Rubio blow up and the reports of it in the press. Who reported this? Who leaked it? Who would have leaked it, and who does it benefit? I think it benefits Marco and Marco's people to leak it, because I think Marco has looked like a lump on a sofa since taking office. I mean, think about that image of Marco sitting in that sofa without moving or saying anything, and looking pained during that Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump were humiliating Zelensky, who Marco used to defend on the in the floor of the Senate. Think about the fact that Elon Musk has cut all of USAID's funds, which are supposedly run by the State Department, and it's included cutting things like aid to the dissident groups and the opposition groups in Cuba, in Venezuela, and Nicaragua. Marco's entire career in Congress has been built in representing the people of Miami, that include those exile communities, and in fighting for aid and support for these opposition groups. Think about Donald Trump having sent Rick Grinnell, his special envoy, to negotiate thereby with Maduro, thereby recognizing this man who fraudulently won the elections in Venezuela. Another thing that Marco has been railing against his entire career, talking up Putin the way Trump has been doing. Another thing Marco has been railing against his entire career, abandoning the people of Ukraine the way we are doing. Another thing that Marco has railed against his entire career, lifting TPS from Venezuelans. Marco used to advocate for the temporary protective status for Venezuelans. So my point to you is, he's looked so ineffective. So he's like a rug.
I feel like you want it to be. I feel like you want to believe that he leaked it, because it would give you some reason to feel like, okay, he's doing something. Because you were on board when he was named to this. I wasn't. Okay. Everything in life is relative. Yes. Brian, okay.
Compared
to RFK Jr.
Compared
at HHS,
to RFK
yes.
Jr.
He seemed like a good
Matt
pick.
Gaetz, who at one point was considered for Department of Justice.
Yes.
And compared to Kash Patel and compared to Hegseth, what I've always said is, you can disagree with Marco on policy, and I haven't in the past on foreign policy. Mm-hmm. You can disagree with him on that, but you cannot say Marco Rubio is not knowledgeable and experienced on matters of foreign policy. He's been on those committees in the Senate, and it's been a passion of his entire life. So I want Marco. Like in my head, I'm like, okay, I hope that listening to all of these speeches and eulogies and homily about the way Lincoln stood up for principle, Lincoln would not have put up with the crap that Marco is putting up, and it's only been 2 months. But like I said today on the show, Marco is in a hell of a bind, because Marco, he doesn't have the freedom of a Mitt Romney or the former Secretary of State under Trump, Rex Tillerson, who basically was reported, called him a moron, and Trump fired him, right? But Rex Tillerson had all the money in the world. All these billionaires have the money in the world, so that if Trump fires them, they've got a safety net. Marco doesn't, because now he's given up his Senate seat. I mean, Marco gave up a lot. He gave up his independence, and now he has no choice but to be beholden to every whim and ridiculous decision that Trump and his minions make. So I think he recovers a tiny iota of dignity with this narrative that he's standing up for himself in the cabinet meeting to Elon Musk.
All right.
I hope it's true.
I
I hope he actually does stand up.
I mean, there's probably a lot of cabinet secretaries that resent Elon Musk. I mean, it's got to drive them all crazy.
Listen, I know, but this thing with Marco, you have to understand that he is sitting there silent
Well, you saw
while
the
they
image
take
of him.
away the
Yeah.
images.
Yeah.
The aid from Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua's
The picture of him on the
political
couch in the
opposition.
Zelensky.
He
in the
looked like he
Zelensky
was,
meeting. Yeah.
shrinking into the sofa, like he wanted to be swallowed up by that sofa. I mean, but then he goes on TV and he defends all the cockamamie
Well, that's his job.
decisions.
He's got to defend the presidents.
So that's why that's why I think this gives him like it's like a little tiny life saver
Yeah.
that he's holding on to. I stood up to Elon Musk.
All right, we're going to go back to politics in a second, but I also wanted to ask you this very quickly because there's another story going on where Gayle King and Katy Perry, among others, are going to be flying into space on the Amazon rocket, which is different, but kind of Blue Origin, kind of the same thing. Is there any version, I'm asking this as both a producer and an interviewer, would you ever go you like a private jet, would you ever go into space on one of these things?
I like yachts. I like jets. I like fancy cars. I like trains. I'm not interested in space like some people are. Like, I mean, like Al loves.
So Al would
all
go up
things
if they
space.
called him.
Oh, he wants to go.
Yeah.
He keeps saying to me, can't you tell Lauren Sanchez that I want to be, Jeff Bezos's fiance, that I want to be, and I'm like, only if they keep you up there. I'm like, no, you can't go up on space for the love of God. And like when he saw, what's his name, the guy that played Captain Kirk,
William Shatner, yes.
Yeah. Who's, up there in years. He's like, you see, I can do this. Would you like to go up on space?
I kind of would. Yeah, I kind of would.
What
Even
would
though,
Heather say?
No, she would say no. She has said no. We've discussed it. Because it's not out of the not that anyone would want me to go by myself, but it's not out of the question that like they send Whoopi up and I get to go and like produce it. I would be into that.
Do you think Whoopi would go up?
I think she probably would, actually. I
she
don't know.
does like space
She
stuff.
likes space. She likes all that stuff. Everyone, the control room shaking their head no. I'm not saying she should go or that we'd want her to go, but I could see her going. I think she'd say yes. Yeah, that's just me. Let's ask her tomorrow. But anyway, that's it. So you would definitely not go.
But where does this thing go?
It just goes into low orbit, so it doesn't go to the moon or anything. But
Like how many minutes are we talking about?
It's a short trip.
Okay, so it's like the possibility that it explodes in reentry or is.
I think it's there. I think the possibility is there. But yeah,
Honestly,
that's not how you want to go.
There are so many other wonderful vehicles that that Bezos owns that I'd rather be invited to.
I understand. I'm just saying it's kind of cool. Like the whole idea of seeing something so few people have seen. Again, my wife would probably forbid me from going, but I'm curious about it. All right, moving on back to politics. This is kind of related to what we were talking about.
Not to mention that that everything that's happened with the Washington Post. I'm having issues now. Talking of which, I was watching not this weekend, but in the last few days. Ironically, there is a documentary about Katharine Graham, the woman who was the publisher and owner of the Washington Post, and it's a documentary actually on Amazon Prime that I watched, and it basically documents her courage and standing up to Richard Nixon during Watergate and the pressure he put on her. They also, in addition to owning the Washington Post, they also own TV stations, and they were threatening to take away those licenses. And that woman had the intestinal fortitude to stand up and not cower and not show fear. Was she afraid internally? Yeah, she was. She was afraid for her organization. She was afraid for her own, physical well-being, but she didn't show it. She was a leader, and she had such principle, again, and conviction. And I am so thirsty for that in anywhere, Brian, anywhere in our academic institutions that are afraid of having the grants taken, in our media that is afraid, in our CEOs and corporate titans that are afraid and bending the knee, in our elected officials, Republican and Democrats, who are afraid of speaking up. Where are the courageous Americans? Where are the guts? Where are the spines of America? Where are they? I mean, I look around and I'm like, why is everybody afraid? And people are so desperate to hear folks stand up. I can't tell you the difference that it makes.
Well, there was a New York Times story last week that caught your eye. I know it caught mine too, about how people on both sides of the aisle who would normally be a part of the public dialogue on the big issues of the day are intimidated. They're intimidated by the online attacks of Trump and Elon Musk. I mean, you obviously are not particularly intimidated because you've been dealing with those attacks for 12 years now.
I don't want to live intimidated. I don't want to live intimidated. I mean, okay, do I think things can happen? Yes, I do. Do I think they're capable of retribution? Yes, I do. Do I think they're capable of saying you need to fire Anna, or you can't hire Anna for this speech or this or that? Yes, I do think they're capable of that. But I am too old and too set in my ways, and I am too respectful of the freedom of expression and of American values to be afraid. I'm not. I refuse to spend the next 4 years living in fear, because when we start censoring ourselves, when we start self-censoring, that's when fascism takes hold. And we are participating by being afraid. A couple of weeks ago, the day that I wasn't here, I did an event in Palm Beach. I did a speech in front of Planned Parenthood. Again, people are desperate for voices standing up and calling out the authoritarianism and unconstitutional, lawless things that are going on in this country. And my heart is warmed at seeing the protests that are erupting impromptu all over America. This weekend, J.D. Vance was, was heckled. Those were protesters, pro-Ukraine protesters in Ohio that were walking to a protest when they ran into him and then started, heckling him and protesting him. This weekend, when it was International Women's Day, there were protests all over this country. People showing up at the town halls of Republican congresspeople and their offices. It is the people leading the way in the fearlessness and the message. I keep saying to folks, stop looking to elected Democrats like if they are going to, like they're gonna have the magic formula, the silver bullet for how to deal with this. Like they're all of a sudden the message, the Democratic, this cohesive, effective, incredibly compelling Democratic message is not going to fall like manna from heaven. It is the people of America, the constituents, the voters. It is regular Americans who are going to shape the next phase of politics in America.
We have breaking news.
What?
The control room called Whoopi Goldberg. The response was a very quick no. She will not be going into space. I can't
even believe that she answered the phone.
I'm kind of shocked by that too. But I think I could convince her. First of all, I'm confident I could get her on the plane.
Oh my God! If there was a sponsor, you'd.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't like regular flying. I forgot about that when I was talking about the rocket. But I think I could get her up there. All right. On that note, thank you for joining me today, Ana Navarro. Joy is here tomorrow. We'll see you then.